I'm not watching this because this is already a bad take. That's a horrible take.
It's just really exhausting to see these same kinds of videos being made over and over again.
Oh, he's so brain broken.
All career conservatives are horrible. And it's like, I just hate you so much.
We all have someone that comes to mind when we think of a narcissist. Someone so insufferable and wrapped up with their own views that they don't even consider other perspectives. To me, the content creator who personifies that notion the most is definitely EthanIsOnline, though there are some close competitors. Nobody really has the same combination of pompousness, awful takes, and flimsy evidence that often contradicts his own points. Ethan's main channel has 250,000 subscribers, and he began uploading 7 years ago. He also has a second channel called Ethan with just over 100,000 subscribers, the gift that keeps on giving. He makes videos with a bit of a leftist lean to them.
But don't get me wrong, all career conservatives are horrible by default. So if you're a conservative watching, this is the part where you're gonna turn off the video. I know you guys aren't really huge on facts and logic, so.
And there's no better misinformation than old school conservative misinformation.
And he talks about some serious political topics, as well as makes other, more general commentary content about TikTok, TV shows, and more. He is extremely self-confident, to the point that anyone who doesn't subscribe to his exact viewpoint must be a bigot or an idiot, or both, and spends most of his videos conflating reasonable arguments with the most hyperbolic and ridiculous strawmans imaginable, so that he can act like his stance is the only reasonable one. He often makes contradicting points that his audience of sycophants just ignores, and cites sources that are invalid or straight up go against his argument because he knows nobody will bother checking, while simultaneously accusing others of making lazy arguments and not caring about facts and logic. He also occasionally accuses others of being terminally online, which is just so rich that it's crazy. As I've scrolled through his channel, I've come to see that he will make pretty much any point or say anything, no matter how outlandish or stupid, just because the person he's arguing with is on the wrong side. It's pretty obvious that whenever his echo chamber is burst and normal outsiders see his videos, a lot of them share these same gripes with him. But usually he's free to get hundreds of thousands of views from people who leave incomprehensible comments or life experiences and have no idea what they're saying. I personally find him extremely unlikable and obnoxious, but I will be trying my best to look at his arguments in an unbiased way for the majority of the video, which is quite different from his strategy whenever making videos about others. But without further ado, strap in and let's explore some of the most egregious behaviors and tactics Ethan uses that make him so obnoxious and allow him to maintain this echo chamber. Something Ethan likes to do quite often is take an argument that originally sounds reasonable enough, or an argument normal people would have, and twist that argument until it is unrecognizable and no longer makes any sense at all, so that he can argue against it. Take, for example, his argument against the no-fap movement that I actually covered a while ago. In the video, Ethan cherry-picks 6 TikToks that argue in favor of no-fap and claim that pornography is addictive. Ethan falsely states that there is no evidence for this claim, and we'll get to why his research is pathetic later, and twists the opposing argument in a truly spectacular way. He somehow comes to the conclusion that everyone arguing against porn are incels, and that they hate women and the idea of having sex.
No, today we're going to be looking at people who take inceldom so far that they refuse to even touch their own body. So we're really getting down to the core of why so many people are no-fap. They're incels. They're just incels. They hate women, they hate knowing that other people are having sex, and want that to stop.
He also paraphrases opposing arguments as, "No more women, strength is come."
No more women. The Bible said no, don't give your strength to women. Strength is cum, and strength is emotion and attention.
The mental gymnastics here are absolutely insane. The idea that people who don't support watching porn by yourself, which by the way can cause sex addictions that lead to poor treatment of women, exploits women, and can normalize violence and other harmful things, are actually the ones who hate women. He also only addresses weaker points of the argument, such as TikToks with fake brain scans, and acts like this one instance of a bad point means that the entire argument is invalid. Finally, he asserts that porn addiction is not a real thing because if you have a terrible alcohol addiction for decades and then stop, you'll die.
If you heavily drink every single day for 20 years and then one day you just stop out of nowhere, you will die.
He is, of course, ignoring the fact that behaviors can be addictions as well. This nature of hyperbolic references and ignoring the real opposing argument allows Ethan to somehow come up with his insane conclusions. Another instance in which he warps the opposing argument is when he talks about the groomer narrative. The initial argument people were making was that kids should not be present in bars and in drag shows that involve sexually suggestive or explicit content. Ethan shows some examples of this in his video, but strangely neglects to show the part where a sign says, "It's not gonna lick itself." And even in the clip he shows, we can see a suggestive looking outfit and dance. It's really not unreasonable to think that kids should not be in these environments. However, Ethan does not really want to engage with this argument. Instead, he spends the entire video talking about past anti-gay legislation from 50 years ago.
It's 1977, the same year Star Wars first premieres in theaters. That's not even that long ago. That could be your stepdad in there. But 1977 is also the same year the Save Our Children coalition was formed. And this is a big deal because before this point, there was no actual organized anti-gay movement.
And showing clips of Ben Shapiro and Matt Walsh calling gay people demons. Now, while both of those things are bad, and discrimination is also bad, we've definitely deviated from our original argument, and Ethan has now conflated people saying children should not be put in sexually explicit environments with people saying gays are dangerous.
Really, the only difference between old school 70s homophobia and modern transphobia is like liberal civility politics.
Now homophobes get to say shit like, I don't hate anyone, but you just gotta keep it away from the kids. These are contradictory statements.
He then takes this argument, along with talking about child beauty pageants, to say that conservatives are always thinking about children, and maybe they're the pedophiles.
Buy my t-shirt that says trans people are bad. And now we can start talking about really creepy shit about children now because we're talking about trans people. Conservatives just, you know, they have children on their mind all the time. You can't blame them.
So this completes our journey from not exposing kids to sex all the way to conservatives hate gay people and like kids. Truly an exhilarating journey. Another hilarious example of this is Ethan's reaction to Paw Patrol and cop TikToks.
It's like, I just hate you so much.
I'm not even joking. Here's the setup. Ethan references true crime YouTubers, action movies, and Paw Patrol, as well as these cringy TikToks made by cops, and claims that they are copaganda.
Whether it's true crime stories, action movies, or Law & Order, anything that represents the police as some sort of universal source of good operating against some universal source of evil can be considered propaganda. Like, crime doesn't just happen out of nowhere, and the police certainly aren't very good at preventing it.
So we're already at somewhat of an extreme overreaction to a kids show, real stories about crime, and fictional movies made for entertainment, as well as some cops sitting in their cars sipping coffee. But we're not done. Ethan sees a picture of cops, quote, standing around, and proceeds to go on this tangent.
Yeah, dude, the cops actually need more money, actually. Oh, the fucking death squad? No, yeah, we need those. These fucking stormtroopers? Can't take those guys away. Like, part of me thinks the first thing that comes to a lot of conservatives' minds when we talk about defunding the police is that they won't look as cool. Like, they're not gonna have as many fucking gears and gadgets and fucking tactical shit.
So now we have turned from kids shows and nonfiction stories to conservatives won't defund the police because they want to look cool. And there's even more. Ethan uses zero research or evidence to make this assertion.
So wait, if the majority, overwhelmingly, of the police force is doing something bad, you would say that every cop, all cops, would be complicit in that system and therefore also bad. It's almost like all cops are bastards.
So now, to sum up his argument, we have somehow made it all the way from Paw Patrol and cringe TikToks to the majority of all cops are doing something bad, and conservatives just want to keep them around so they can look cool. Ethan may not be a star athlete, but his mind is the world's most skilled gymnast. But falsely twisted narratives aren't the only thing Ethan uses to make his arguments sound more convincing. He also occasionally attempts to use research. Now we're really getting to the facts and logic part. But Ethan isn't exactly the best researcher, and there are many occasions in which he will cite sources that don't support or even contradict his points, or are just not stellar in general. Let's look at some examples. There honestly aren't that many examples of Ethan using actual research, but in the few that exist, we can see some contradicting points. We'll start with the evidence that he supplies to support that pornography is not addictive. His only real evidence to support this is that some prominent psychologists and sex researchers don't think that it is.
To the point where there are prominent psychologists and sex researchers who argue that porn addiction isn't even a real thing. So comparing porn addiction to something like actual hard drugs is fucking insane. If you heavily drink every single day for 20 years and then one day you just stop out of nowhere, you will die.
While saying this, he shows on screen an article that states that the APA does not consider porn addiction to be a real addiction. Now, because I actually do research and want to be intellectually honest, I will explore this claim. This article references that the DSM-5, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders 5th edition, does not include pornography addiction as a real disorder. However, this has not been updated since 2013, and there have been many studies conducted since then that suggest that brain activity when viewing pornography is actually similar to that when engaging in other addictive behaviors. According to a study found in the National Library of Medicine called The Neuroscience of Internet Pornography Addiction, a Review and Update, a common thread through many neurological studies was that the addiction model was appropriate to apply to internet-related behaviors, notably including viewing pornography.
This is just another one of those extremely online positions, which is where initially the vibes are off. You just don't like something.
Yeah.
Something makes you uncomfortable, or you've subscribed to a, maybe a no-fat mindset or something.
Right.
And then it's like, but facts and logic. I need.
Yeah, you have to like romanticize it.
Phrases. I need rationales. I can't just feel something.
Here is the rationale, buddy. Here it is, right here. The study also describes the APA's decision to only include internet gaming disorder in the list of internet-related addictions as, quote, biologically and behaviorally inconsistent. Now, the only source he provided to back up his overall argument actually opposed seemingly all neural data regarding the topic. Additionally, the only actual specific study he cited was to debunk this obviously fake TikTok.
Porn, it literally rots your brain tissue away.
How much porn? How long? How old is this person? What kind of porn? Digital porn? Magazines? Were they watching people have sex in person?
This is what's known as an SPECT scan, which stands for Single Photon Emission Computed Tomography. It's usually used in a medical sense to diagnose things like seizures, tumors, strokes, things like that. And according to a study published in the National Library of Science and Medicine, that was published in 2013, but nevertheless, at present, we have no evidence that would allow us to estimate the value added to psychiatric diagnosis by SPECT imaging.
He obviously wants to look like he does research, but reliable research that supports his claims does not exist. So he instead has to resort to arguing against stupid TikToks instead of actual opposing points. Ironically enough, Ethan actually states that this specific topic is something he does a lot of research on.
Now, I'm a very sex-positive person, and sex research is something that I'm very passionate about. In fact, this video is something that I've been trying to work on for a long time, but I've been trying not to make it so lecture-y.
If this is all he can come up with, and this is one of his stronger topics, that really does not bode well for the rest of his content. This dude is a joke. Another example of Ethan flubbing up his research comes from his groomer narrative video, in which he shows a study that looks at the sexuality of people on the sex offender registry.
We're gonna have to talk some facts and logic. So if you're a conservative watching, this is the part where you're gonna turn off the video. I know you guys aren't really huge on facts and logic, so...
He pretty much dismisses the entire argument because it says that 80% of the people surveyed were straight.
The source that I found on this is a UCLA Williams Institute study on demographics of people in sex offender registries all across the United States. For some reason, the sex offender registry, I don't think, keeps track of sexuality. So they had to survey people on the sex offender registry to even get the data. So right from the top, basics. 80% of the people in this registry are straight. I think we're done, right?
Oh my God, bro.
I don't know if you guys are aware, but there are actually more straight people in the US than gay people. Now, I actually found this study, and it literally states in the exact study under demographic information that the proportion of LGBTQ people in our sample is almost 4 times the national estimate of LGBTQ identification. Ethan literally said there are more straight people than gay people, totally disregarding the fact that in the very same study he referenced, they actually stated that the percentage of LGBTQ people was 4 times the population percentage, really owning them with facts and logic. Ethan goes on to point out disparities between jail time of the two groups, totally disregarding the fact that these numbers do not account for the severity of the crimes or if people have committed more than one crime, which would result in higher amounts of jail time. Finally, he debunks the groomer narrative by pointing out a 0.2% difference in solicitation between the two groups, and totally disregards a much larger difference in cheese pizza, statutory rape, and sodomy. His confirmation bias is on full display, and it's obvious he either maliciously misrepresented this article or is too dumb to actually read through the information. The vast majority of the rest of his content kind of relies on sweeping generalizations, personal anecdotes, or literally just Ethan spewing stuff with no supporting evidence whatsoever. Unfortunately, it seems like a lot of people can't be bothered to actually verify the information they get from him, and that's what I wanted to talk about next. The reason that this lazy content with a lack of research and wildly twisted arguments can be accepted by Ethan's audience is that they're seemingly incapable of critical thinking. It's really rich because he complains about this himself without even realizing the irony.
But accepting this narrative completely uncritically reveals a greater bias against gay people and queer people.
This applies to Ethan too, seeing as he's able to read just a few lines of a study, or even just that a couple people agree with him, and decides that this is clear evidence in his favor and that his own views are fact. This entire thing just reeks of confirmation bias, which, as I'm sure you all know, is the tendency to seek out information that is consistent with your current beliefs, and to ignore information that is inconsistent with them. So what does Ethan do when he is presented with information for and against his points? He uses the fact that some people say porn isn't addictive as evidence for that point. Just the fact that he does this literally shows he is completely ignoring the number of people that say it is addictive. Referencing his other research flub, he literally sees the initial numbers of gay and straight offenders and just turns his brain off, ignoring the actual context. It's crazy just how wildly good Ethan is at having absolutely no integrity. And this is analogous to his entire audience as well. Do you think they watched his video, looked up the statistics, and read the studies he was referencing, as well as did research on some other things that could completely contradict what he's saying? For the vast majority of them, I feel pretty confident saying no. Judging from the usual comments on his videos, and, well, the fact that he still has an online career at all, it's pretty clear that nobody is doing that. As unfortunate as it is, that's how an echo chamber works. These people are just looking for things to confirm what they believe, and it doesn't really take much to reach that threshold. This has to do with being so confident in your own views that you cannot accept views from others. So let's get into Ethan's narcissism next. Narcissism is defined as selfishness involving a sense of entitlement, a lack of empathy, and a need for admiration, and is often characterized by arrogance and an inability to respond to criticism. According to the Marriage Recovery Center, narcissists find it difficult to comprehend other viewpoints and expect others to conform to their beliefs. Ethan is unable to comprehend that sometimes people won't agree with his hyperbolic stances, and that even if they don't, these people aren't completely evil monsters who never do anything good. He seems to think that if someone disagrees with him on anything, they must be a horrible bigot in every sense, and can never say or do anything good. An example of this is the video he posted making fun of Alex Rosen of Predator Hunters. Alex has tweeted and said some questionable things online, and he seems to have a conservative lean. Ethan saw this and apparently decided that everything he has ever done and will ever do is bad, including the arrests of actual predators in over 30 states. Now, you may be asking, what could Ethan possibly say that would invalidate the arrest of child predators? Not much. He pretty much just insults Alex's appearance,
And be a pedophile too, because you look like a pedophile. Guy who is definitely only into adults.
ironic, calls him creepy for enjoying catching predators, and says that the amount of people he catches compared to the amount of stings he does is too low for his taste. But we'll get more into that video later. Another example of this immature inability to accept other viewpoints was this video Ethan made responding to Moist Critical calling modern art dumb. Now, instead of being reasonable and accepting that not everyone agrees with his exact takes on art, which is perfectly okay, he makes a 43-minute long video talking about how art is inherently political.
Of course, there's a political component, right? All art is inherently political, either in its influences, messages, or implication. 101, guys, this is a baby step.
And that people who don't like modern art are just insecure about their inability to understand it.
Yeah, modern art can be weird and frustrating and confusing, but rather than embracing and trying to understand those feelings and why you feel them, so many people choose to let that frustration trick them into thinking the art is at fault. That's not true.
Really, buddy? Is this political? Tell me, is this picture liberal or conservative? I'm lost. Also, just on a personal note here, I don't really think this is hard to understand. I think it just looks like a toddler drew it. But moving on. As I said earlier, Critical made a video clowning on some of this modern art, and we kind of all know that if someone is a reasonable, non-hateful, non-radical person who clowns on both sides of the aisle equally, it's definitely him. Well, what is Ethan's response to this seemingly neutral take of not liking art?
Fascist propaganda and gamer streamer should not be saying the same thing.
That's right, he literally compared him to fascist propaganda because he didn't have the same taste in art as Ethan. You really can't make this stuff up. Other than that, you can kind of just tell this guy's a narcissist because of how smug he is.
So if you're a conservative watching, this is the part where you're going to turn off the video. I know you guys aren't really huge on facts and logic.
They're incels. They're just incels.
He presents himself as the moral compass and the only one who operates off of common sense. If others disagree with him, they must be secretly evil people associated with an evil agenda, and that's why they don't have the same exact tastes and viewpoints. I could honestly put a lot more in this segment, but the fact that this guy is a narcissist is pretty apparent to a lot of people who watch his videos. So let's move on to why Ethan's content is extremely lazy. Ethan is constantly accusing conservatives of being lazy, but with his combined lack of research, lack of feasible alternative suggestions to whatever problem he's made up in his video, and ignoring issues he should care about just to make a point, I'd say he's probably the lazy one. There are many examples of him totally disregarding some issues he is usually vocal about in order to twist the argument in his favor. One of these occasions is when he criticizes the NoFap movement and completely ignores the objectification and poor treatment of women in the adult entertainment industry. Here's him and his friends straight up laughing at the idea that women are exploited.
It proppers up the exploitation of countless women and underage girls. Very bad news.
Very bad news, actually.
Your Honor, very bad news.
You know what? I don't think that's a good thing. How do you conquer if you're in a monogamous relationship?
Is it specifically pray save your sons because this is supposed to be like patriarchal advice? Like,
Yeah.
hey kiddo, hey sport, pornography's evil.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Hilarious. He does make a slight mention of poor treatment of sex workers at the beginning of his NoFap video, and another slight passing mention near the end about fetishization of trans people and people of color, which might be true, but what does that even mean? Anyway, he completely ignores the objectification of women, when usually over-sexualization is a common point among leftists, and even worse, he disregards the fetishization of actually harmful things, like violent sex and rape. As has been shown in studies, the pleasure felt when getting off can eventually overwrite feelings of guilt or shame, and lead to people considering the things they watched as more normal. I'm sure both Ethan and I can agree that abuse is bad, but he conveniently ignores this point so that he can continue clopping it guilt-free. He also disregards the well-being of women when talking about trans athletes. He reacted to a movie called Lady Ballers that tells a story about a team of transgender athletes that dominate the competition. Unfortunately, this movie is already hyperbolic and goofy in nature, so Ethan doesn't have to do his normal exaggerated strawmans, but he does use this movie as a substitute for real concerns about women's sports.
It's based on the hypothetical concept that conservatives have invented and used as a talking point against trans acceptance. Because what if they're too good at sports? Has anyone ever thought about that? This is the modern conservative struggle. These are their woes.
Not even mentioning the fact that contact sports, or even sports like volleyball, become very dangerous when matched with someone significantly more powerful than you. Even in swimming, the women on the Princeton University swim team have spoken up in frustration about Leah Thomas, a transgender woman who has beaten Olympic swimmers and set records. Some swimmers anonymously came forward to say that to ignore Thomas's biological advantages would be to undermine a half-century fight for female equality in sport. Now, who should care about women's rights? Ethan! And I know that many others on the swim teams came out in support of Thomas, but according to Ethan, some people say this is sufficient evidence, so don't bother with that point. Ethan seems to really disregard the women in sports and the sex industry when it's convenient to him. Another example of him not seeming to care about certain things when it's convenient to him is when he makes these remarks about police officers that happen to be homosexual.
It's funny because he's a gay cop. Do you know what Stonewall was? Cops were there. They weren't exactly on our side. There are a lot of examples of like queer cops on TikTok, and it makes me want to throw up because queer people are extremely marginalized and the criminal justice system is no exception.
You know, Ethan, when people normally make remarks about gay people grossing them out, some would consider that to be called homophobia. But he doesn't really seem to care because of course all cops are bad. So he can't accept that good people or people of a certain group can also be police officers. So he resorts to being homophobic and just throwing a temper tantrum because he can't comprehend that this sweeping generalization and hyperbolic argument doesn't actually account for reality. One final thing Ethan pretends to care about while throwing the point aside when it behooves him is, well, children. He does this in his video ridiculing Alex Rosen of Predator Hunters, in which he calls him weird and creepy for pretending to be a child to catch predators. He makes claims such as he is putting children in danger because he used a picture of his little brother as a profile picture, and that he's just clout chasing.
What is the point of what he's doing other than clout?
Finally, he claims that the police can't arrest someone even if they admit predatory behaviors in these videos because Alex isn't actually a child. Well, according to Alex, other YouTubers, and fans, this is untrue, and he has actually gotten a good number of arrests to occur with his quote-unquote sting operations. He also calls Alex brain broken for thinking that it's fun to catch predators.
Well, I don't take off days. I love to work. So luckily, I think catching predators is the funnest thing somebody can do. So it really works out well for me.
So he's so brain broken. He doesn't take off days. He just sits inside on the internet, probably scrolling Twitter all day long.
I was very confused as to why in the world Ethan would make this video, until I found out that Alex Rosen said some conservative things, and it kind of clicked instantly.
Because the predator hunter anti-file dog whistles are extremely right-wing in nature.
What do you mean by that?
Fortunately, this is one of the videos that actual normal people found, and consequently, they're all tearing him apart, as he just sits there liking all 2 of the positive comments and ignoring the criticism. One other reason I call Ethan lazy is that in his dogshit videos, he does a great job of twisting things into terrible problems that are created by the filthy conservatives, but in many occasions, he doesn't really seem to suggest an alternative solution. For example, in his propaganda video, he makes the claim that crimes don't happen by themselves and police aren't good at preventing them. That is an amazing point, but as other astute viewers may be asking themselves, what would actually prevent crimes if we didn't have police? Well, I'm glad you asked, because in the 20-minute video Ethan posted having a tantrum over TikToks, he did not actually suggest a single solution to the problem. He did actually suggest that they not have firearms or not be so ready to use them, which is a great suggestion to prevent crime, because if someone was committing a crime but you put your weapon down and ask them politely to stop, they have no choice but to do it because of social etiquette. Jokes aside, this video is literally 20 minutes of complaining, buzzwords, and exactly 0 suggestions as to how to actually improve the situation. See, complaining is the easy part. Actually suggesting ways to fix problems and saying something that benefits the world is hard. Ethan is not exactly all about doing the hard intellectual work. His only alternative when criticizing the predator hunters was, well, nothing. He does say to touch some grass at the end of the video, but that's it. All he did was insult his appearance and imply that 44 arrests and 30 convictions that otherwise would not have happened at all is not enough.
God damn, dude, he basically does nothing. He's lucked out every time he's really caught someone and actually gotten them convicted. Such a grifter. Anyway, I'm done watching this now. This pedo hunter stuff is really gross, really exploitative of people's emotions, and ultimately it's very self-serving for this particular predator hunter. You couldn't even put
I guess his solution would be to let the 30 people go along with committing the heinous acts that they intended to do with minors because, well, the guy who caught them is a conservative. Well, aside from being lazy, Ethan is also a hypocrite of immense proportions. So let's explore a couple examples of that now. Ethan is not very self-aware, and sometimes might find himself epically owning the cons with some sick burns and mad insults, without necessarily realizing that they apply to him, like, perfectly. Probably the most prevalent example is when he accuses people of being terminally online. This guy actually has the cojones to accuse other people of being terminally online when he is sitting at just over 6,400 total tweets. From the way he will literally sit there and heart every single positive comment on some videos while scrolling past any negative ones, as well as just making videos with deranged takes characterized by someone who's been radicalized by being on screens and never interacting with normal people in real life ever, it's safe to say that this is pretty hypocritical. He's also hypocritical about, well, being funny. In a reaction to someone responding to Noah Samson, Ethan makes a remark about how he's not funny and just says words in a goofy way as a sad attempt at comedy. Oh, and he also makes fun of his hairline.
See if his hairline. See if he says words really funny, like really funny, then you're gonna laugh. He's gonna keep saying them funny.
Well, this is hypocritical in more ways than one, with one reason standing out to me immediately. But the second reason is because Ethan is extremely unfunny and also makes the same pathetic efforts to be funny.
Well, I've never wanted to be a straw before in my life, so that's a first. Cool.
What if they're too good at sports? Has anyone ever thought about that?
Pretty self-explanatory. Another one that's pretty rich is when he accuses people of making lazy content to radicalize people. I know I already did an entire segment about how his content is lazy and he doesn't do any intellectual work or fact check anything he does, but in this instance he's talking about commentary channels that make videos talking about the most generic topics over and over again. Bold words from someone who makes a ton of videos about Ben Shapiro, Pearl, Matt Walsh, police being bad, PragerU, pastors, and TikTok. Gee, that sure isn't very generic at all, and I totally wouldn't expect to see the same exact topics on the channel of literally any leftist content creator on the face of the earth. I guess the parts that make him unique are the fact that he doesn't double check his research, he makes extremely hyperbolic strawman arguments to justify his points, and he's extremely condescending. Oh wait, awkward. Well, we'll just move on, I guess. We can still talk about the radicalizing part of Ethan's statement. When taking into account that he's talking about commentary drivel that talks about simps and OnlyFans girls, we can also look at the content Ethan is putting out. Ethan's research is misleading, he doesn't include context for the points he's arguing against, or sometimes doesn't even specify what he's arguing against at all, so that he can morph the situation to fit his logic. These points are often anti-establishment, anti-media, and political in nature, while vilifying the subjects with extreme exaggerations. If someone were to look at that information and the definition for radical, I'd say they line up pretty well. Ethan is a lazy, pompous, and insufferable hypocrite. It continues to evade me just how Ethan has managed to maintain a decently sized audience when it seems that growing numbers of reasonable people are finding his channel and taking a dump all over it. Almost every video has nearly all positive comments, and these people don't seem to be capable of critical thinking in the slightest to be able to actually tolerate and enjoy this content. I stand by my assessment of his audience being made of 14-year-olds and wine moms, and also that Ethan is a fucking goober. If I were to say something positive about him, it would be that I am impressed by his ability to maintain a bubble around him of people that share his opinions. That's probably as far as I'll go with that. I think it's pretty clear that if the persona he exhibits in his videos is actually his personality, then he probably has some form of narcissism. And his inability to have real arguments or accept other viewpoints, or even to not completely demonize someone that disagrees with him on one thing, is pretty telling. I can only say that when consuming content online, especially content that includes serious topics and isn't just like making fun of someone, it's very important to think critically and form your own opinion, and assess the sources being provided. Obviously, it shouldn't be the viewer's responsibility to do a content creator's research for them, but clearly with people like Ethan having a platform, and some of his friends as well, it becomes necessary if we're going to be able to form accurate stances. But with all that being said, thanks for watching, and make sure to leave a like if you liked the video, leave a dislike if you dislike the video, and leave a comment with your thoughts below, as well as any topics you might want to see in the future. Also subscribe to be radicalized by my lazy content. Alright, see ya.